Hello, welcome to Everything Hamilton County. Today we are here with one of my favorite school board members. Her name is Rhonda Thurman from the Hamilton County Department of Education. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things. We plan to talk about education, the recent facilities plans, and a lot of other things that's going on in Hamilton County. So I want to welcome you, Rhonda, here on the set.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you for being here with us.
I'm glad that you invited me. It's great.
Well, let's get into it. But before we talk about the school board stuff, I want our viewers to understand where your roots are and just how you got started here in Hamilton County.
Okay, well, I was born here and raised here and went to public schools my entire life. My family, my mother's from Daisy Mountain. My husband's from Daisy Mountain, and my dad was from the city of Saudi Daisy. And so that's where my roots are, in the north end of the county. That's where all my relatives are. I've been a hairdresser for 43 years, and my customers just, every year it seemed like when it came budget time for the schools, they needed millions more money, and everybody, well, what in the world are they doing with this money? So I started a group at that time called Citizens Advancing Responsible Education, or CARE. And we got organized and we started delving into the school budget and asking lots of questions. And then we were also very instrumental in stopping the wheel tax when it was put on a referendum. And we won. So that was one of the things that we did. And then a few years later, when Mr. Eldridge decided he was not going to run for school board, I decided at that point I would run, and I did, and that was in 2004. Oh,
wow. So you've been on the board now for how many years?
A long time.
A long time. Wow.
About 15 years so far, and by 2020 it'll be 16.
Wow. One of the things I can say, you probably don't remember when the first time I met you, but the first time I met you, it was during a Leadership Chattanooga. I believe Chattanooga Matters was putting on a leadership program for young people coming up. And so, I was telling Doug at that time, all I heard in my family was about this Rhonda Thurman lady and that she was crazy. And but that was the first time I met you. And so when I met you, when you stood before us, I remember you passed out a handout and it had all of the budget numbers from Hamilton County. And as you began to go through that budget line upon line, while we were sitting there, I said to myself, this lady knows what she's talking about. I said, actually, she makes more sense than anybody I have ever heard talk about the school board. So that was my first introduction to you. And so ever since then, I've been a fan of yours. And I tell everybody I meet, I said, she probably knows more than the superintendents that we hire to run the school system. And so I just want to thank you for that, for just even coming into the community to explain those numbers to regular people like me that don't really understand.
Well, they're really not that difficult. They want to make them be difficult as to confuse people. Their budget's no different than your budget at your house or my budget at my house. It just has a few more zeros. But the 2s and 2s still have to be 4. They want you to think 2 and 2 is 22, but it's still 4. And so, it's really not that hard to understand.
Well, what would you say right now is one of the main concerns that you have with our school system in Hamilton County?
Well, of course, kids not being able to read. That's my number one beef with the school system, and it has been since I got in here in 2004. Why can students not learn to read? And they keep wanting to put more and more money into it. But Patrick, I learned to read when we didn't even have computers. Doug learned to read. He didn't have computers. Abraham Lincoln, George Washington learned to read. They didn't have computers.
Right.
We didn't have all this data. We're so eaten up with data, it gets to be ridiculous sometimes. They want to put every child into some kind of category, some kind of disability, some kind of emotional problems. They want to put all kids and give them an excuse for not being able to read instead of just continuing to make them learn to read. Also, I think we try to teach children to read too early. They start in kindergarten, and a lot of kids are just not developmentally ready to learn how to read. And so a lot of kids who can't read real quickly, their parents really start pushing them, and they get to thinking that they're dumb and that they can't read. And sometimes, and I get this not from just Rhonda Thurman, but I have a lot of customers who are teachers and who have been teachers. And that's where I go to for my information. People who have been in the classroom and they know. and they're the ones who have told me that we just try to force kids to do too many things too quickly, and they're not developmentally ready, and we can't change that. Kids their brains haven't morphed into some kind of different creature than we were if you were born back in the 50s. I mean, all kids are still born, and they're with the same kind of brain. People say, well, kids learn differently now. Well, they may after they get up and get exposed to the world. Their thinking process may be a little bit more set, but as children, you should be able to teach them to read. And like I say, I just think we need to let kids be kids for a little while, and then by the end of the first grade, most teachers will tell you that, it's before kindergarten was mandatory, that by the Christmas time of the second grade, you could not tell which kids had been to kindergarten and which ones had not, because they were all developing at about the same pace at that time. Wow. But like I say, that's just some of my thoughts, because I look and I try to see what's different now than used to be. Because the kids haven't morphed into something crazy. It's just, I think the adults around them have just lost sight of just common sense.
Right. And that's something that, in working around the school system, especially, I worked in a lot of the inner city schools in the urban areas. And one of the things I saw there were a lot of those kids that could not read, and they were in high school. And a lot of them were in 12th grade getting ready to graduate, and they can't put together a complete sentence in an email or on a piece of paper. And I began to ask myself, I was like, well, how are these kids not learning to read when there were slaves that learned to read? You had Frederick Douglass that taught himself to read, and he was able to pick himself up from beneath poverty. I believe slavery is below poverty, but he came from below poverty to advising 5 presidents, and he taught himself to read. And so I'm saying, what is wrong with our school system now to where we have kids that have been in school for 12 years and they still don't know how to read?
Well, it's funny you make that statement about slaves learning to read. I made the same comparison one time. I was told I was a racist.
Yeah.
But that is absolutely the truth. And, those slaves learned to read knowing that they could be killed. Mm-hmm. And the people that were teaching them to read could have been killed. Mm. But it was that they knew that was their way out of poverty. They knew that was their way out of slavery. And it's still that way today. Mm-hmm. This is your ticket out of poverty. Mm-hmm. And if you're enslaved to the government to take care of you, this is your way out. Mm. And I don't care what color you are, that the education is your ticket. I have my younger brother went on, and I have 2 brothers, and they're very similar in some ways, but very different in other ways. I have one brother, my older brother, loves to work with his hands. Mm-hmm. If it's anywhere from a weed eater to a bulldozer, he can fix it. Mm-hmm. His brain just works like that, and he has a really good job and has done very well in his life. Well, my younger brother went on to college, and matter of fact, he's graduated so many times. The last time he graduated, I said, "No more gifts. This is over." But he is a pilot, a professional pilot, and he was also a pilot in the Air National Guard. Flew C-130s. He has made a very good living for himself. But they both knew that an education was their ticket. They had, they both made very productive adults, chose completely different paths. And that's another thing we do in the school system. We just assume everybody wants to go to college. Well, they don't and don't need to. Mm-hmm. But you can make a very good living doing other things. And I think that we kill the dreams of a lot of people by forcing them to go to college maybe when they didn't want to. Maybe they wanted to do something else. But anyway, the kids are different. We all try to make them be the same. That's why I like so many different kinds of education. Ivy Academy, for example, in Hamilton County. When they first wanted to do an Ivy Academy, I thought, oh my goodness, is this going to be a tree hugger type situation where these kids are going to be real far out and stuff? But after I got to seeing what was going on at Ivy Academy, and especially with the principal they have up there now, Angie, she does a fantastic job. I have relatives who teach up there.
I've worked for Angie as well at Ivy Academy.
And I really like Angie, and I have a cousin who teaches up there, and they're working with the forestry department. Those kids are very hands-on. Mm-hmm. She's opened up a whole new world for some of those students who go up there. Mm-hmm. And it's just something different. The kids that maybe didn't fit into the high school where they were going. And that's why also, Patrick, I'm very much a fan of open enrollment, to let kids go to any school they want to go as long as there's room in those schools that we did for years and years before Jesse Register showed up. And I think one of the worst things that Jesse Register did, well, it's hard to pick how many worst things he did, but I'll just pick the worst. He made so many magnet schools. And in doing so, he destroyed so many neighborhood schools. So that's one of the things he did. He cut down. You could no longer go to a school outside of your zone. We had what I call zone Nazis that go around. I mean, they were even doing crazy things, like if they found out that there were some parents that had rented apartments in a zone where they wanted their children to go to school, they were sending people out looking in windows to see if there was actually any furniture in this. I'm thinking, seriously? We're paying people $100,000 years ago looking windows. Go figure. But anyway, I just like so many different learning styles. And we have, as we know, at least over 25% of the kids in Hamilton County go to private school. And that's good with me. I think we all make each other better. You know, a lot of people on the school board don't like the fact we have all these private schools and kind of shirk at them. I think, hey, the proof's in the pudding, guys. These guys are producing a fantastic product. And instead of going to New York or California and trying to find out what makes school work, why don't we go to some of the private schools here and find out what they're doing? We don't have to go very far. We have some of the top-notch schools in the country here, and we also have some schools who have been producing students who can read and stuff for years, and also the homeschoolers here. Wow, we have a great homeschooling network. A friend of mine is working with, and another thing people have to understand, on the school board, my role is to educate students. And that's just not the kids in the schools in District 1. That is to educate the kids in Hamilton County. I don't work for the superintendent. Superintendent works for me. I don't work for the teachers union. I don't, they do their own deal, but that's not my deal. I want to see all kids learn, and whatever it takes for them to learn, I'm all for it. A friend of mine was going to talk to some churches about starting some pre-Ks and some kindergartens in some of the churches that have unused buildings. I know at our church we have a whole wing that's not used, a whole educational building, and hire some teachers who were former elementary school teachers that didn't get out because they were tired of teaching. They got out because of all the bureaucracy. I'd like to have some of those teachers come back in and maybe get the private school down to where a single mom or a newly married couple, with a few little kids, and they want to get them in a private school. Get it to where they can afford that. Without being afraid for their children's safety, because safety is the number one reason that students are in private schools. It's not academics, it's student safety.
Wow, and it's amazing that you say that, because even myself, my kids went to Ulawa Elementary School, private school, and when we started looking at private school for them in middle school, that was the number one thing that we looked at. Where is the safest school in Hamilton County where I can be at work all day and know that my children are safe? And I know a lot of parents think about that when it comes to their children.
Well, you wouldn't be much of a parent if you didn't.
Right, exactly. I want to talk about some of your critics. You said earlier that you make statements, and I know last year, they had you all in the paper, you and Joe Smith, and they were calling you all racist. And I know you personally, and I know that you're the least racist person I have ever met. But what do you say to those critics that, that actually just believe that you are just on the school board to cause havoc and to ruffle feathers? What do you say to your critics?
Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. You tell me one thing I've said that has been wrong. I'm still for open enrollment. I was against all the magnet schools. I was right, because so many of them have shut down. I was against the everyday math program and the connected math program. And if you look at our math scores, in about 2005, the bottom dropped out of our math scores. That's because we adopted this ridiculous math program that the kids could not understand, the parents could not understand, and even people like my husband, who was an engineer for years, he went to math night at our school, and we had a kindergarten teacher who had, one semester of math, maybe in college, trying to tell my husband why we didn't need to memorize multiplication tables. And at that point, my husband said, the inmates are running an asylum, our daughter's going to private school. Well, she will not be exposed to this math. And that's when we put our daughter in private school, was because of that math.
Wow.
Because he said math is too important to squander our daughter's education away on this nonsense. So I was right again. And then it has taken, it's like turning around a huge cruise ship. It's taken a long time to turn it around. They say they've gone back to more traditional math. I still don't believe them. I don't think we've totally done that. But it just destroyed the math education here in Hamilton County. We owe those kids that suffered through that and graduated from high school not being able to do a long division problem. We owe them an apology.
Wow.
But that's just some of the things. There have been so many things. I've told some people, if you would have they said, well, you've been on the school board so long, why haven't you changed anything? I get outvoted, 8-2, I'm just ready to throw a party.
Yeah.
I'm at 7-2, I'm ready to throw a party. So it's usually 8-1. But, I'm going to vote my convictions. I'm going to vote my way if I have to. I don't mind standing alone as long as I'm standing in the right place.
Right.
And that's where I'm going to be. And if everybody else wants to continue voting the other way, then I'm going to say, prove me wrong.
Yeah.
And I was that way about our reading. We've had all these interventionists that they've just hired some more interventionists. Interventionists have been in some of our failing schools for years and years. Has it made a difference?
That's true.
Let's figure out what the problem is. I think this is my biggest frustration, Patrick. We see the problem and we keep wanting to double down on what we've been doing that didn't work. We've had some organizations in our school, some of the organizations like the Public Education Foundation, for one, who've been in some of our schools. They were in the city schools before we merged. They've been in some of our schools 30, 35 years. Maybe not quite 35, but at least 30. Has it improved? Some of these schools. If not, then let's figure out what the problem is.
Yeah.
And let's try to address the problem. A lot of it is a societal problem. We have the kids 10 months a year from 8 o'clock to, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 10 months a year. We can't change these kids' world. All we can do is to try to get them where they are and teach them the basics that they need. A friend of mine teaches a chemistry class in high school, and he told me, he said, I don't know what I'm going to do with these kids. They can't even read. How in the world can you do chemistry and do all the reading we have to do in chemistry, and these kids can't read? Now, that is tragic to me.
Yeah.
That is tragic. Let's find out where the problem is. High school teachers shouldn't be having to teach reading. And then you want to judge a teacher because a kid is failing in high school in chemistry. You want to blame the chemistry teacher when they can't read. Another friend of mine, teaches literature in high school and says, these kids can't read. We can't even read some of the famous literature. Because these kids don't comprehend what I'm trying to tell them. So, and then that their kids score low and you blame the teacher. And granted, there are probably some teachers that may not need to be in the classroom. I'm sure that's true. But I'm not sure exactly what the problem is, but somebody needs to figure it out because what we're doing is not working.
And one of the things I respect about you is that you always ask those tough questions and you always challenge the status quo. And I think that's what has happened in Hamilton County schools, is that we've accepted the status quo, and you always challenge that. And so I really, really thank you for doing that. I wanted to ask you about the tax hike that we just went through. I just want to hear your thoughts
on
the attempted tax hike that we just went through. I know that you as a Lone Ranger voice in that as well. I would like to know your thoughts on that.
Well, they were going to hire 350 more people, and it's just crazy to me. If you understand the BEP formula, it's not that hard to understand. They say you need X number of teachers for X number of students. And anything over that X number, you have to pay 100% of. You don't get a penny from the state for their salary. You don't get a penny for their retirement. You don't get a penny for their health insurance. Hamilton County taxpayers have to pay 100% of that. Almost everybody in the central office and all support personnel, almost, not all, but almost, very few of those do we get one penny of money from the BEP. We come across with 100% of that. We have like 560, I think it is, more teachers than the BEP says that we need. All these people that we just hired, that 188.5, not a one of them do we get a dime from the BEP that I've been able to find there. So next year, if the teachers get a pay raise, we're going to have to give a pay raise to another 188.5 people that weren't there this year. We couldn't get them a 5% raise this year. They think they're going to get a 10% next year with another 188 people.
Wow.
And it's just like, is it me, or this doesn't make sense to me at all? So I think that they keep wanting to add more and more people instead of putting more and more time into the classroom. And I tell you, Patrick, I was very upset last year. And one reason I continue to vote against the budget is because they continue to spend money in crazy places. For instance, up in Sale Creek, we did not have a higher level math teacher in high school. If a student at Sale Creek wanted to take a higher level math course, they had to do dual enrollment at Chattanooga State and pay for it.
Wow.
While at the same time, we're putting all of this extra support in some of these schools, and then you take a Sale Creek, which kind of languishes out there by itself, and don't give them a higher level math teacher. Now, would I vote against the whole budget for that? You're right, I sure would. Because to me, if it's going to be about the students, let's make it about the students. If not, I want you to quit saying it's about the students. If it's going to be about the teacher in the classroom, let's make it about the teacher in the classroom, or shut up. You know, I just get tired of all the jargon, and I call it edubabble. Every few years they come out with these education, snippets. It used to be rigor and relevance, and they come out every few years. They come out with some. In the last few years, I'm trying to remember what it is, and I call it edubabble. It just sounds good,
Games.
Yeah, it just sounds good. But and they're here in Sale Creek. We're putting $6 million into a stadium down at Howard. And at Sale Creek, the kids, we finally got some money from Fred Skiller when he was county commission, and from the county went and prepped a field for us by North Hamilton County Elementary to make them a football field so they could at least practice. The parents put down the sod, the parents put in the sprinkler system, they lined it off, they did everything. But the kids can use it to practice on, but they still can't play on it. So they're having to go from Sale Creek to Finley Stadium every Friday night when they have a home game to play. How many people do you think from Sale Creek are going to drive that far on Friday night and get home when it's really late? And some of the older people there who would love to go to some of the football games. So I have asked for 3 years now to give them some lights, give them some bleachers, give them a bathroom there and a concession stand. And so the cost of it, they told me, was between $500,000 and $600,000. Okay, let's get it done. They said, well, we're going to build a stadium for them when, in a few years. Well, 5-6 years we're going to get a stadium up on their property that we just bought up there. That's going to be 5 or 6 years down the road. These kids going to have to drive this far for 5 years? Why can the kids at Sale Creek not get $500,000 so they can play football at home? So this is why I was so angry about this building plan that they came up with. We can't even come up with $500,000 to give Sale Creek a football field, but we can put $6 million at Howard, because I think Howard, they didn't have a suitable football field, and Sale Creek both. And so they got the whole last. Why not give each one of them $3 million, or something? But anyway,
and you hear all this talk about equity.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This is the most inequitable thing in the school system right now. Is what's going on up at Sale Creek, and I'm going to keep pounding and pounding about it. It makes me angry every time I think about it, because the kids. Until last year, Sale Creek was having to pay to rent Finley Stadium. At least I got Dr. Johnson to agree to pay the rent down there and to give them some kind of transportation down there. But, there's that's one big inequity. Is that enough for me to save this building plan? No way. You're right. It sure is, because I have to fight for these kids. And I tell you what, I've also fought a lot for the kids at Lookout Valley that I thought were getting the short end of the stick a lot of times. Because I want, if you're going to talk about equity and inequality and all this stuff to me, let's, as they say, be real.
Yeah.
let's not be just giving me a lot of lip service. I want to see what's going on, and I will continue to fight for those kids up there.
Yeah.
Because they're just as important as anybody else's, and it's not fair for them to have to pay to take a math class.
Yeah. And that's one thing you've been consistent on is fighting for your district and fighting for your constituents. And the final thing I really want to talk about is this facilities plan. As you know, they just proposed, I believe it was $1.3 billion in this facilities plan. And I had heard you say something about you all have done a facilities plan before.
Oh, we've done it. The night we adopted this, it's going to be a $500,000 consultant fee, which I laughed out loud. I said, "You can't be serious." We've done this for years in house. We have a maintenance department. You get a legal pad. You walk through. You ask the principal, "What does this school need?" You write it down.
So you're telling me that we spent $500,000 for a consultant to do something that we're already paying people to do?
Yes. Oh yeah. We've always done this. As a matter of fact, one year the Times Free Press even walked through the schools with us, and they were making their own list. You get 10, 12 people together, and everybody's making their list and going through and looking at things that need to be done. And we still have not fulfilled everything in our 1999 facilities plan. So the very idea that we took $500,000 that could be sitting up there doing Sell Creek some good, when we were told we didn't have the money for it, and that $500,000 came out of our budget.
Wow.
And so this is why I get so angry, because it's just ridiculous in my opinion.
Wow.
And then too, we don't have a nickel to do one thing with, and so I laugh at that too. Where are we going to get the money to do all of these things? I mean, some of these things are ridiculous on its face, but some of them, like combining Alpine and Rivermont and DuPont into one school, that was on our old facilities plan, and we still haven't done that.
Wow.
So.
Yeah, and I did read, as I was listening to him go through the report, and he was saying that there were so many schools that were at 50% capacity, and we've been operating these schools for like 10 years at 50% capacity and things of that nature. Those are things that I didn't know and I didn't really believe, but when you look at the numbers, it's there. And so...
Well, there are a couple of things here. First of all, when the school systems merged, there were 45,000 students. Now we're down to about 44. We've been stagnant. You were involved in some of the charter schools, so you knew this to be a fact. Charter schools are Hamilton County schools. We count those students in our enrollment. Okay, they're counted in our enrollment, but they're not counted in our building plan because charter schools have to provide their own buildings.
Oh, wow.
So how many hundreds of thousands of kids are in charter school? We're not providing it. They provide their own. Another thing, we're putting pre-K into our school buildings, and that's not our charge. Pre-K is not our charge. We are charged with K through 12. And I don't know if I have time to get into the thing that I've talked to some of our state representatives about is doing the vouchers for pre-K. Instead of putting them in our school buildings, taking up valuable classroom space that we could be using for something else. And they're the most expensive rooms that we build in a school are pre-K rooms because they have to have their own restrooms. They can't use the restrooms with other students. They have to have sinks in them. To do vouchers for those. Because now what we're doing, we're putting all the pre-Ks in. We're putting churches out of business who have pre-Ks. We're putting people out of business like Primrose, ABC, Discovery Point. We're putting those people out of business by having pre-Ks. Let's use the voucher program for that. See how it works with that. Something that's not our charge. Quit making the taxpayers pay for rooms for pre-K when it's not our charge, when K through 12 is taking up classroom sizes, classroom space for them.
Wow. Well, thank you, Rhonda, so much today. We can talk about this for hours. We're going to have you back on the next quarter because I believe your voice needs to be heard. Just like you changed my heart when you stood before me and gave me just the raw numbers and the raw deal of what's happening in our schools. I believe the community needs to hear more of you. And so what we want to do here at Hamilton Flourishing is give you that voice to be able to speak to those people to where you can get what you need in your district and you can let us know how we can help you.
Okay,
So
well,
thank you for coming.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
Well, thank you all for joining us here at Everything Hamilton County. Again, go to our Facebook page at Hamilton Flourishing, like and share this video, and also go to our website and sign up for our email list. Our website is www.hamiltonflourishing.org. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time. If you like this video, please subscribe. Be sure to click the bell so you'll receive notification when we release a new video. Be sure to go to our website, www.hamiltonflourishing.org, for more information.